Hi, this is Reconsiderations After the Idea of a Writing Center. I'm Patrick Schott. I've been teaching in Rockford Public Schools for 16 years. I have a master's degree in curriculum and instruction. I'm currently enrolled in a dual credit accreditation certificate program. That's my son, John, and I getting a little wacky after too much time in lockdown. A few resources you may want to look at. The first is the text of the idea of the Writing Center, which this paper is responding to. That's on the left. On the right is the actual paper I'm presenting. And in the middle is the idea of the Writing Center, a close look analysis at this by my classmate, Clark Favorite Church, who was nice enough to let me include his presentation here. The goal of a writing center is to make better writers, not better writing, is something that came out of Stephen North's first paper, the idea of a writing center. And this is true as more and more students were sent and allowed to attend college in the 70s and 80s. Writing centers became a necessity. The problem was writing centers were viewed by English teachers as correction places, fix-it shops for grammar and spelling and punctuation, a place just to drop off your paper, to have it looked over, not an actual teaching location. And this was a problem for Stephen North. He didn't like it. He thought writing centers provided opportunities for teaching and research that a classroom simply cannot offer. And this was supposed to be something that's available to every student, not just low-level learners or writers. Every writer can improve, no matter who you are. You can improve your writing. And in his mind, North's mind, writing centers should be centers of consciousness. The goal that writing centers should improve writers and not necessarily their text are what get changed in the instruction, and our job is to produce better writers, not better writing. That is the axiom that came from this text, and it was a landmark text. It was called by Murphy and Law the single most important and quoted essay in Writing Center scholarship. It was a mission statement for Writing Center administrators and staff members who were all too happy to lead the charge in championing the importance of writing centers. It was cited 64 times in 195 papers by 60 unique authors. There was a chunk of issues, 32 of which in the Writing Center Journal contained a reference to idea. That was 80% of the total issues. And this may seem good. It was talked about. It was widely discussed. The problem is it was only talked about in a very small group of people, mainly administrators and teachers who worked within writing centers. The actual classroom teachers who really needed to read this paper were the ones who did not read it or write much about it. And when a significant part of the article you're talking about talks about how writing centers are viewed in a classroom by teachers, and those teachers are not aware of what's going on and how a writing center can and should be used, it's very difficult for real change to take place. And that is in part what happened, to the effect that 20 years after this piece was written in 2008, we can take a look back at how much impact this piece had, for good or for bad. In 1994, Stephen North himself called the idea of a writing center a public idealization, a highly visible version of our mythology, and a romantic idealization of what a writing center could be. It had become his piece so mythic within the writing center community that it had become almost like an echo chamber. And the problem with it being just a small group of people talking about it led to no real close analysis of the ideas put forth by North. And as a result, it was taken as a novel, a completed novel of how a writing center should be run instead of like a first chapter and more to be added to. It was not viewed as a living document, which is what his intention was. The reception of this piece was the fact that it led to an imbalance in scholarship in the field. This particular article had too much influence on too much writing, and it became the beginning and the end of what a writing center could and should be, and is dangerous when one theorist, one article, and one line becomes to represent something as important and dynamic as a writing center can and should be. Without outside viewpoints, which is an important part of growth, it's hard for people to change, for a situation to change. And that's what happened with writing centers. They never really began to change and to move. It became something that kind of stagnated a little bit. Atrophy set in. And that was unfortunate because writing centers can and should be places of good, not just places to drop off a paper when you're done.